Let's move on to question number 7 from section 5.2. And for question number 7, I need to write the equation of a line which passes through the given set of points in slope intercept form. Okay, so here are my points, 3, 5, and 2, 4, and I need to write that in slope intercept form. Now for these kind of problems, what you want to do first is you want to be able to find the slope. And when you're looking for the slope, I would just use this little formula that's been taught in class. The slope is the difference between your y values divided by the difference in your x values. And then after that, you can go right to the slope intercept equation, or you can use the point slope equation and then change it back to slope intercept form. So you have some flexibility if you want to use this green equation or this green equation. It doesn't really matter as long as you end up in slope intercept form, but you definitely want to find the slope first with these kind of problems. All right, so for question number 7a, let's go ahead and find the equation by finding the slope first. So if I want to find the slope, let's label this as m because m is the variable for slope. Now, in order to find the difference in the y values, I always take the second y value, in this case it's 4, and I subtract it from the first y value, which is 5. And then I divide that by, let me erase that now. Then I divide that by the difference in the x values, which is the second x value, which is 2 here, minus the first x value, which is 3. All right, so that's step number 1. You want to be able to find the slope right away. All right, so 4 minus 5 is going to be -1, divided by 2 minus 3 is going to be -1. So -1 divided by -1 is just +1. So my slope here is +1. Okay, from there, I can definitely now move on to find the equation here. So I can use y equals to mx plus b, or I can use y minus y1 equals to m times x minus x1. It really doesn't matter. For this first example, I will go ahead and just use this equation of y equals to mx plus b. And I know that my m value here has a value of 1, so maybe I can plug that in right away. So y equals to 1 times x plus b. Okay, so I'm done with this m equals to 1 here. And then from there, just pick one of the coordinates here. So you can use either 3, 5 or 2, 4. It doesn't matter. I will go ahead and just use the second coordinates here. So this is your x value and that's your y value. So whenever you see this y value, I can change that with 4, right? So this y now becomes 4 equals to 1. And what is the x value? Well, the x value is just 2, right? So it's 1 times 2 and then plus b. So this is now 4 equals 2. Well, 1 times 2 is 2 plus b. And if I isolate for b, I subtract 2 from both sides. So if I bring this 2 to the other side here, it's going to be 4 minus 2, which is going to be +2. So b would equal to 2 there. All right, so then I can just go back to my equation here. I'm just going to erase all this because we're almost done now. I can rewrite this as simply as y equals to 1x plus 2. So this 2 right here is that 2 right there. And that's it for question 7a. So if you want to use the y equals to mx plus b formula right from the get-go, or right after you find the slope, you can get the correct answer by doing a little bit of algebra. Okay, let's move on to question 7b. And for 7b, I'll take a slightly different approach to this question. But step number 1 is we still need to find the slope. So I need to find the difference in the y values. So the y value that I'll target first is that 1. So 1 minus, and then the second y value is -2. So 1 minus -2 in brackets, all divided by, okay, and then what is the second x value, which is -3, minus the first x value, which is +5. All right, and then from there, we just, then after that, we just kind of execute the calculations here. So 1 minus -2, well, 1 minus -2 is the same thing as 1 plus 2 divided by -8, right? So -3 minus 5 is -8, and this is going to be 3 over -8. So my slope here is going to be -3 over 8. All right, so there's my slope there, and then after that, I need to find the equation of the line. So using a slightly different method now, I can use the y minus y1 equals to m times x minus x1, the point slope equation. And I know that my m value here is going to be -3 over 8. And then after that, you should also look at your y1 and your x1 values. Now, it doesn't matter which coordinate you pick. I'll go ahead and just use the -3, 1 coordinate there. So if I do that, this is your x1 and this is your y1, right? So this 1 will now go over here, and this -3 will go over here, right? So if I do that correctly and substitute my numbers incorrectly, this will be y minus 1 equals to my m value, which is -3/8, bracket x. And now I gotta be careful here. I have a -3 and a -x1. So if I substitute those values in, that's gonna be +3. All right, so 2 negatives gives you a positive value there. All right, so there it is. There's my equation of a line right there. Now I need to change this into slope-intercept form, right? So what we need to do now is I need to distribute this -3/8 into the brackets. So now I get -3/8x, and then minus 9/8, right? So just remember here that -3 times +3 is going to give you -9. And then I have a y minus a 1 over here. All right, now I have this -1 here. I need to just bring that to the other side here. So if I continue writing here, this will be y equals to -3/8x minus 9/8, and then now it's essentially just +1, right? Now remember, this part right here, we're dealing with a fractional calculation there. So when you see that blue +1, it's better to write the 1 as just 8/8, right? So 8/8 equals to 1. So if I erase this 1, I can write that as 8/8. And now you can see I have the same common denominator. And now it's a little bit easier to kind of rewrite the value of the y-intercept at the very end there. So -9. So -9 plus 8 is going to be -1. So it'll be -1/8. And that right there is the equation of the line in slope-intercept form. So that one did take a little bit of work, but we can definitely use the point-slope method here too to get to our final answer there. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Question number 7c. So I got to find the equation of the line in I need to find the equation of the line in slope-intercept form. So let's go ahead and find the slope right away. All right, so I need to look at my y values, right? So I have -3 and -1. So my slope is going to be -3 minus 1 divided by, and then let's take a look at the x values, which is -2 minus -4. So it's going to be +4. +4 on the bottom there. So be careful with the plus and minus signs, right? If you have two negatives, then you get a positive sign. So -3 minus 1 is going to be -4, and -2 plus 4 on the bottom is going to be +2, and my slope is going to be -2. Okay, so there's my slope, and now I need to find the equation of the line. So let me just write down the point slope form of a line. And I know my m value, it's going to be -2, and then I need my y1 and my x1. And let's go ahead and just use the -2 and the -3 for my x1 and my y1 values. Okay, so this means this -3 will go over there, so this will be y plus 3, right? Two negative signs gives you a positive, so y plus 3 equals to the m value, and the m value is going to be -2 onto x, and then there's a negative sign there, so that'll be x plus 2. Right. All right, that's looking pretty good here. And then from here on, just a little bit of algebra here. Let me get a different marker here. My green marker here, just distribute now. So if I distribute, I get -2x minus 4, and then y, and then I have a +3 here. If I bring that +3 over, it becomes -3. So this is now y equals to -2x and then minus 7. So there it is. There is the equation of my line in slope-intercept form. Okay, let's move on to letter D now. D is going to be a little bit harder here because I know that we're going to have a fractional answer for my slope. Let's go ahead and find the slope value, which is the second y value, which is -4, minus the first y value. So that's going to be y plus 2 now, right? So remember, two negative signs gives you a positive, right? All divided by, and now I need the difference in my x values, which is -6 and that -1. So I have a -6 minus, but I have a -1 here, so that'll become +1. All right, so now m would equal 2. Now look at my top here, -4 plus 2 is going to be -2 all over, and -6 plus 1 is going to be -5. Right, so if I take a look at that, negative 2 divided by negative 5 is going to be positive 2 over 5. So that's my slope right there. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and write out, let me just kind of change it up now because I've been using the point slope equation here. Let me just use y equals to mx plus b now. So if I have y equals to mx plus b, I can also use this line as this equation of the line as well. And for this one, it doesn't matter what points that what point you that you want to use. I'll go ahead and use this first one just because the numbers look a little bit easier to deal with. So this is your x value and that's your y value. And so that means this y will change with the negative 2, this x value will change with the negative 1, and we know this slope value has a value of 2 over 5. Okay, so let's go ahead and substitute that in now. So that means I have a negative 2 here equals to my m value, which is 2 over 5. Now what's my x value? My x value here is going to be negative 1, right? So negative 1 and then plus b. Okay. Now in this case, now we're solving for b, right? So this will be negative 2 equals to negative 2 over 5 and then plus b. And then if I want to solve for b, you would take this negative 2 over 5 and you would bring it over, right? So the algebra is a little bit different, but it still gives you mathematically the same answer. But if you want to try this method, feel free. I just want to show a variety of different ways to do these kind of problems here. So now I have negative 2 plus 2 over 5, right? So let's just do that calculation over on the side here. Negative 2 plus 2 over 5. So basically I need a common denominator, right? So this is now technically over 1 here. So I need times the top and bottom by 5, right? So that means this will become a 5. And if I times the top by 5, this 2 will now become a 10. Now, if I take my negative 10 and add 2 to it, that gives me a negative 8 over 5. So negative 8 over 5 equals to b. All right, so my final answer is going to be y equals 2. Now, what's my slope again? My slope is 2/5, right? So my slope is 2 over 5 x, and then minus my y-intercept, which is minus 8 over 5. So that is another way where you can find the equation of the line by using y equals to mx plus b. So it's your choice on what method you would like to use. All right, let's move on to letter G here. And letter G, this one is actually going to be probably the easiest one because they actually give us the y-intercept right there. So that saves us a little bit of work. But we still need to find the slope, right? So the slope is going to be the second y value, which is 0, minus the first y value, which is negative 6. So this becomes plus 6. All divided by the second x value, which is negative 4, minus the first x value, which is going to be 0. Now, if we go ahead and calculate this, 0 plus 6 on the top is going to be 6, and on the bottom I have just negative 4. And if I reduce this fraction, this is going to be negative 3 over 2. So that's my slope right there, which is negative 3 over 2. Now, if you think about the equation y equals to mx plus b, we just found the slope, right? The slope is negative 3 over 2. But my b value here is just negative 6, right? Whenever the x value here is 0, this is actually your y-intercept, right? So you can just substitute that negative 6 right in for b right away. So my final answer is y equals to negative 3 over 2 x and then minus 6. And that's it for that particular problem. Okay, let's take a look at some of these reasoning problems, and I do recommend that students should definitely go through all the reasoning problems because I think this would definitely solidify your understanding of linear equations here when you're graphing them. Let's take a look at some of these reasoning problems here. So for question 8a, if a line is horizontal, what is the slope of any line that's perpendicular to it? Okay, so when you have a horizontal line, or a graph that with a horizontal line, this slope is equal to 0. Okay, now if you want a line that's perpendicular to it, remember perpendicular means there's got to be this negative reciprocal relationship, right? So think of 0 as the same thing as 0 over 1, right? So 0 is technically the same thing as 0 over 1. What is the negative reciprocal of that? Well, the negative reciprocal of that is going to be a negative sign, and then we just flip these, right? So 1 goes on the top and 0 goes on the bottom. Now, if you actually went to your calculator and typed in negative 1 divided by 0, you would get an undefined answer. All right? You can't divide anything by 0, so that's undefined. So if you have a horizontal line that has a slope of 0, then the slope of any line that's perpendicular to it is actually just undefined because of this calculation right there. All right, that's it for question 8a. Let's look at 8b now. If the graph of a linear equation has one point if the graph of a linear equation has one point that is both the x-intercept and y-intercept, what point would that be? Okay, so you have a linear line that has the same x and y-intercept. Well, if that's the case, your graph will look like this, right? And then this purple point right here, that's your x-intercept, but it's also your y-intercept. So this coordinate right here is 0, 0, which is the point that we're looking for. All right, so that's it for question 8b. All right, so question 8c, what is the equation of the x-axis? So here's my axis right here, and my x-axis is just this horizontal line right there. And that horizontal line has a height of 0, right? So that equation, the equation of that green line is really just y equals to 0. So that's the equation of the x-axis. All right, let's move on to letter 8d. I need to find the x-intercept of this equation in standard form there. Okay, now remember, the definition of an x-intercept, this is key, right? Whenever you have any x-intercept, which is my purple dot right here, I know that, I don't know what point that is, maybe it's -3, but the y value I do know is going to be 0, right? So when you're dealing with any x-intercept, the y value goes to 0. Okay, so x-intercept y is equal to 0. That's key. All right, so all we're going to do now with our equation here is anytime I see the y variable, I replace that with the 0. All right, so for any x-intercept, the y value is equal to 0. And then if I do this calculation here, 2 times 0 is going to be nothing, so I have 3x equals to 8, and then I can divide both sides by 3, so x would equal to 8/3. So my x-intercept is going to be 8 over 3, and then comma 0. All right, that is my x-intercept. Once again, for any x-intercept, the y value is always 0. All right, let's move on to letter E here. Find the value of c so that the graph of this has an x-intercept of -2, 0. Okay, fair enough. So your x value is -2 and your y value is going to be 0. So all we have to do is when we're looking at our equation that's given to us, we're solving for c, right? So if I'm solving for c, I need to get that by itself. But I know x would equal to -2 and y would equal to 0, right? So if I plug in those values, it's going to be 4 times -2 and then plus c equals to 3 times 0. Okay, and if I go ahead and execute the calculations here, this is going to be -8 plus c equals to 0, right? 3 times 0 is 0. And that means c would equal to +8, right? So all you have to do now is bring that -8 over. Negative becomes positive, so c equals to 8. All right, let's take a look at question letter 8f now. Find the y-intercept. Now, when you're dealing with the y-intercept, it doesn't matter what any y-intercept you have, I know that the x value is always going to be 0, and maybe this height here is, I don't know, maybe it's just 5, right? I don't really care what the height is, but the x value is always 0 when you're dealing with the y-intercept. Okay, so now we're given this equation, which is 4x equals to -3y plus 2. So we're just stating that this x value has a value of 0 now when we're dealing with the y-intercept. Okay, and 4 times 0 is going to be 0, equals to -3y plus 2. And now now the goal is to isolate for y there. If I bring this positive 2 over, it becomes -2 equals to -3y. And then I divide both sides by -3. And my final answer there is going to be positive 2/3, right? So that 2/3 there equals to y. And if I want to write the exact coordinates, it would be 0, 2/3. So that is my y-intercept there, 0, 2/3. Okay, let's move on to, I'm going to skip G because it's very similar to question AE. Let's do H next. If A is not 0, and then what will the graph of AX plus C equals to D look like if A is not 0? Okay, well, since X is my only variable there, A, C, and D are just numbers, let's go ahead and isolate for the X term there. If I do that, I should definitely move this positive c over, which is now going to be it's going to be d minus c, and then let's divide both sides by a. And if I do that, the a's cancel off, and I get x equals to d minus c over a. Okay, so the question is saying that a can't be 0, so that means that the bottom part of a fraction can't be 0, which is great. But you have to understand that this whole thing is just a number. All right, it's a number, and since it's x equals to some number, what you're graphing is just a vertical line. So maybe this is x equals to d minus c over a. D minus c over a, that's just a number, right? So this is a vertical line. So whenever you have x equals to something, it's always a vertical line. Okay, and I guess for letter I here, now it's the other side now. If b is not equal to 0, what will the graph of this look like? And I can probably assure you this will be a horizontal line, right? So if I went ahead and isolated for the y term, it would be by equals to f minus e. Remember, we're taking this positive e and bringing it over, so it's minus e, and then we divide both sides by b. And I can see that and that cancel off, and now you have y equals to f minus e over b. So the algebra here is very similar to the kind of algebra problems you see in physics. And since I have y equals to, remember, if it's y equals to anything, it's just a horizontal line, right? So maybe this is f minus e over b. F minus e over b is just another number, right? Any random number, so this is a horizontal line. Sorry, I meant to say horizontal line, so L-I-N-E. Okay, good. So we want a letter J. What is the equation of a line with x and y coordinates that are equal and passes through the origin? All right, so if you're passing through the origin, I mean, the graph looks like this, right? And if you make a table of values here of x and y, let's just say x is 1, which is right there. Then this corresponding value also has to be a 1, right? Because x and y have to be the same. If that's the case, then the equation of this is just y equals to x. That's the equation of a line that goes to the origin. The slope is 1, which ensures you that the x and y coordinates will be equal. And if I just tested one more point here, let's just say x is 2 now. If x is 2, if I go ahead and plug that in, then this height will also be a 2. All right, so the x and y values here are equal. So the answer is y equals to x. Moving on to letter K here. What's the equation of a line with x and y coordinates that are opposite in value and passes through the origin? Okay, so if it passes through the origin and they're opposite, then the graph just goes, the graph is very similar to the previous question. It's just that the slope will be negative. So the equation is y equals to negative x. So this is how it works. If I have a positive 1 here, then the height here will be negative 1. All right, so if you do a table of values here, if this is positive 1, then the y value will be negative 1, which guarantees you that the opposites, so the x and y values are opposite, right? Let's just do one more. If I take, I don't know, negative 2 over here, what's the height at negative 2? Well, the height at negative 2 is going to be positive 2, right? So that's negative 2. The opposite of that is going to be positive 2. So my answer is y equals to negative x. Okay, so moving on, just a few more to go. What's the equation of a line that passes through the point a comma b with a slope of 0? Okay, so a comma b, let's just go ahead and just plot that point. Maybe that's a comma b right there. If you have a slope of 0, then that means that your line is just a horizontal line. Now, what's the equation of that line? It's just y equals, and what's the height? The height is b, so the equation is y equals to b. All right, moving on to M now. What's the equation of a line that passes through the point a comma b with an undefined slope? Now, when you have an undefined slope, it's just a vertical line, right? It's a vertical line. So if I had to just kind of graph this out, here's the point a comma b, and if I have a vertical line passing through this point, then it will look like this, right? So the equation of that vertical line is x equals to, and it's just the x value, which is just a. So x equals to a is the equation of that line. All right, for letter N here, what's the y-intercept of this? Now, when you're dealing with the y-intercept, the easiest way to deal with this is to understand that the x value is always going to be 0, right? So if x is always equal to 0, take a look at this. I have ax, right? That's just going to go to 0. Then I'm left with by equals to c, and then isolate for y by dividing by b, and you notice that those will cancel off, and y would equal to c over b. So my y-intercept is going to be 0, comma, c over b. Right, so remember, for any y-intercept, the x value is always 0, so that's why you set the x value over there equal to 0. And for letter O, what is the x-intercept? Okay, so whenever you're dealing with an x-intercept, we know that the y value is going to always be equal to 0. So you really need to understand that when you're dealing with these x and y-intercept questions. And you don't need to memorize this. I mean, just draw a graph, right? So very similar to some previous problems. Here's my x-intercept right there. I don't know what that value is. This is random x value, but the y value is always 0, right? Now, if y is always 0, then over here, you know, the y is touching the b. That just goes to 0, right? So 0 times b is just 0. So I have ax equals to c, and then divide both sides by a. Those a's cancel off. X equals to c over a. So my x-intercept is c over a, comma, 0. And finally, what's the slope of this line? Well, we've done similar problems like this, but with numbers. Just isolate for the y term. So this is going to be by equals to. This ax will be negative ax because I bring it to the other side, and then plus c. And then we divide both sides by b. All right, those b's cancel. So now I have y equals to negative a over b, then x plus c over b. And what's the slope? The slope is simply just a over b. So that's my slope of that line.